Life improved with age. Pour yourself another glass of 50 Plus with Doug Pike.
Welcome back to 50 Plus. Thank you for listening. Certainly do appreciate it. Hope we all learned something about living arrangements for mom and pop, or maybe for ourselves, I guess. You're in the age group, you got to be thinking about it. I was interested to learn, essentially, that the older we get, the more we want to stay at home. Imagine that. We get crotchety and set in our ways. We don't want to leave. Eventually, though, no matter what we do or who we are, our time's going to run out, and that's where my next guest comes onto the stage. Welcome now, Chip Beresford. He from Beresford Funeral Service. Let me get him punched up here. Hey, thanks for the time, Chip. I appreciate you joining the show.
You bet, Doug. Thanks for having me.
All right, so you mentioned somewhat casually in our first email exchange a while back, in addition to a lot of fishing information, that people who need funeral services typically don't realize how many options they have and how much money they could save if they knew those options. That pretty much sum it up?
I agree. You know, most people don't shop for funeral arrangements. It's just a topic that you don't really want to. But statistically speaking, a funeral is the third largest expense someone faces in their lifetime. After the purchase of a home and a car, statistically speaking, it's a funeral. And I believe in applying some of the same strategies that we do to making any large purchase to a funeral purchase.
Yeah, you've almost got to. It's something you certainly don't want to do, and there are all sorts of prearranged funeral services you can buy and tuck away the paperwork for a rainy day. Make sure your kids and your friends know where those papers are. Do you think that's a good idea?
We kind of jokingly call it making a reservation without checking in.
Oh, golly.
So there's a couple ways to do it. One is, to first of all shop online and see what you can find out before going to a funeral home and sitting in front of a high-pressure commissioned salesperson.
Okay.
So do some research. Yelp it. I mean, we're all into. There's so much available now on the internet where you take it, do it at your leisure, at your timing, before you go down and sit at one of these big funeral homes, and you walk out with a quote for $25,000, and so that's ahead of time. So just imagine if you're faced with making that kind of decision for real without any kind of prior knowledge. You're already going into it with some emotional baggage going on.
Sure, you're kind of stunned. You're in shock.
You've never done it before. Most people haven't. And, if you're fortunate to have some life insurance, they're going to try to take it all from you. Yeah,
however much you got, that's how much it's going to cost in a lot of cases, isn't it?
Oftentimes, yeah.
That's pretty sad. Let's take on some of the myths about these funeral expenses. I don't have to buy the casket from the funeral home, do I?
Not only that, but there's no law that even makes you have to have a casket. So
really?
Yeah. I mean, so there are people that will make their own caskets, bring them to me, and I'm perfect. As long as it fits in the grave and fits in the vault, if the cemetery they're using requires a vault, that's perfect. You can go online. I was one of the ones that first started the whole online casket thing. We started a company called the Pine Box selling caskets to people a lot less expensive than they could buying it directly from the funeral home. And the Federal Trade Commission is one of the many people that regulate funeral homes, and they require a funeral home to accept a purchase of a casket from an outer vendor, and a funeral home cannot charge any extra fees or not handle your service if you choose to do that. You can even buy a casket at Costco nowadays and have it brought to a funeral home.
Holy man. How long does it take to get one delivered like that?
That's the thing. I mean, so most of the time funerals are done pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do that, just make sure whoever you get it from just can get it there timely, or just arrange your services around that. But there's even a group of Trappist monks in Iowa that they own a forest, and that's how they fund their little monastery. They make and sell caskets online, and they're beautiful wooden caskets. Some of them are pretty plain, other ones are pretty ornate.
How many people know that in this world?
Nobody.
Now a lot more do now than did an hour ago. That's for sure. What's the difference in cost for buying a casket on site and buying one online?
When I had the Pine Box, we were selling caskets as low as $395.
Golly.
And so now my least expensive casket that we offer is $695.
Okay.
There are funeral homes in this town, or one funeral home in this town, that has a casket on their showroom floor for $105,000.
Holy mackerel. That's just almost.
That's if you want to take it with you, I guess you buy a $105,000 casket, right?
And the casket generally is going to be the highest ticket item in the funeral service, right?
It can be, yes.
What else could be then?
Well, you look at the whole funeral service is several different components.
Okay.
And so you have your funeral home charges, and the casket is one of those many charges. Then there's the whole cemetery part.
Yeah, the plot.
So there are cemeteries in this town also that will sell a plot or a group of plots for over $100,000. That's one where you have a nice view of the lake, or I'm not quite sure who that view's for.
Yeah. Wow. It's how can you get around that? What about land? Just costs what it costs, doesn't it? Or can you shop?
Well, you shop, and so well, first of all, if you're a veteran, take advantage of what the VA offers. So any honorably discharged veteran, as well as their spouse and any dependents, are eligible for free burial space in any VA cemetery. So Houston has a lovely one. It's beautiful. It's well maintained and cared for. So they'll provide the plot for the veteran and the veteran spouse, and provide that headstone. Also provide a vault. So if so that's free. Can't get any cheaper than that.
No, holy cow.
There are other cemeteries, and I know them all, that range from under $1,000 to, as I mentioned, well over $100,000. But one of the things is shop for that. Try to negotiate with the cemeteries and say, look, I'm interested in this. Will you take something less than what you're offering it to me for? The other thing is there's so many people had either inherited or pre-purchased cemetery property, and for whatever reason they changed it. They don't want to use them anymore. They're going to be cremated. They're going to move to wherever.
Sure.
So you can go online. It's kind of hard to find them, but there's a lot of people selling cemetery properties as individuals that will certainly sell them to you a lot less than the cemetery will.
Sure. Chip Beresford from Beresford Funeral Services with us on 50 Plus today. Since 1991, by the way, funeral directors are interacting with people like we mentioned when they're grieving a really tough loss, probably not as business sharp as they might be otherwise. How often or what percentage of funeral homes do you think nationally are really out to take advantage, and which one? How many of them are trying to help you?
I don't know really how to answer that question other than it's buyer beware. And I don't really feel the funeral home's out there to intentionally take advantage of people, but there are many of these funeral homes that do offer commission incentives to their employees and things like that. So when you offer that type of incentive to, frankly, a salesperson, so who are they motivated to help more? You, the grieving family member, or them who,
they got to eat.
Forget,
they have to eat.
I was approached by a family who was trying to bury a child. And this was during that whole Enron thing. And they were going to come to me and get a casket, and this was an anticipated type of thing.
Yeah, okay.
They were coming to me. They were looking to save some money and wanted some advice from me, things like that. And I was offering it to them. And they came back, and they were telling, and they were really upset. And I was like, oh, my gosh, did it happen? And they go, no, but we wanted to tell you what happened. Went to one of these funeral homes. I'm not going to name it. But they said they put the high pressure on us so bad to go ahead and prepay for this. And we're like, this is something we're looking forward to. We're going to handle it when it happens. He got a call one day at work, and the cemetery salesperson said, look, if you could just prepay this, I'm going to qualify for a trip. And,
oh, my God.
Yeah, so, that's not often that happens, but it tells you what's going on in this industry sometimes.
Holy cow. What's the biggest mistake people make when they're planning a funeral?
I guess by not researching ahead of time. A lot of times people will pick a funeral home or a cemetery simply because it's maybe the one they've driven by a bunch of times or the one they visited last. If you can imagine, a nurse comes out at 2 o'clock in the morning. This is an unexpected thing, and says, Mr. Pike, I'm sorry, but things have happened.
Yeah.
What funeral home do you want us to call? And you are on the spot.
Yeah.
And you just say, we'll call this one, not even knowing what they're going to charge.
Good point.
And you show up for your appointment, and before you know it, seriously, the least expensive or the middle-of-the-road package, you're looking at about $18,000, and that's just for the funeral home part.
Yeah, that's just getting started. Golly. Believe it or not, we're close to out of time. Quick question. If I buy my casket elsewhere and they say it's going to take 3 days to get it there, does the funeral home charge to hold your loved one for 3 days?
If they do, they have to disclose it to you.
Okay.
So they have to itemize their bill to you, and they have to tell you up front. And they have to tell you over the phone if you ask.
Okay.
So
That's good to know. That's very good to know. Holy mackerel! We may have to go again because I have a whole lot more questions left on this sheet of paper than I have scratched out. Is that fair enough, Chip? Can we do it again? All right, buddy. Thank you so much, man. I truly do appreciate it. Chip Beresford, how do they find you? You have a website?
Yeah, just go to thepinebox.com. It'll take you right to our funeral home website.
All right. Thank you, Chip.
Thank you.
See you, buddy. All right, that's going to wrap it up for 50 Plus. I certainly do appreciate it. We learned about strokes, we learned about assisted living, and we learned about funerals. Back next week with more 50 Plus. Adios.